an independent constitutional officer. That's why the governor appointed me, and I intend to discharge the duties of this office as I see fit.
When he took office early last year, Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey touted himself as a constitutional conservative devoted to following the law. Since then, he's made headlines for a number of reasons, battling wrongful incarceration cases and transgender care. He's also gone to court against Planned Parenthood, accusing the group of trafficking minors at one point. Bailey's from St. Louis County, went to Mizzou. He is an Army veteran. Before becoming AG, he worked as a prosecutor and has served in several legal roles in state government. Bailey has made a point throughout the course of his campaign to tell voters he supports former President Donald Trump, and not just in his policies. Bailey has taken and threatened legal action in defense of Trump in the past. Now, we did reach out to Bailey's team repeatedly for weeks to try to get him here on our program with no luck. Thankfully, we've talked to him before. Here's a bit of my conversation with the candidate, starting with his penchant for using his platform to discuss and defend the former president. How does this serve the people of Missouri in your function as Attorney General?
Well, the lawfare against President Trump is injecting poison into our democratic process, and Missourians have a right to participate in a national election on equal footing with other states. And when you've got a rogue prosecutor and collusive judiciary in the state of New York who are taking a presidential candidate off the campaign trail and silencing him through an illicit gag order, that harms Missourians' rights to have access to and hear from a presidential candidate. The First Amendment protects not only a speaker's right to say, but listeners' rights to hear. And Missourians have the right during the heat of a campaign to hear from a national presidential candidate.
You know, we talk about the gag order. You have threatened to sue the state of New York. You talk about this gag order on the former president. What does that have to do with day-to-day life in Missouri? We know the former president is still allowed to campaign and debate. He just can't talk about witnesses, jurors, and other people connected to that case in New York. How does this affect people in Colcamp or Harrisonville?
Well, again, what you're seeing is a rogue prosecutor in New York that's attempting to hijack a national election. And Missourians are denied access to the president if he's tethered to a courtroom in New York or ultimately sentenced to either prison or probation. It's injecting confusion into the electoral process. The process in the state of New York is replete with ethical problems and certainly with constitutional violations. And so, yes, Missourians can hear from President Trump, but not on the full range of issues. His core political speech is still being violated by the gag order. And again, that harms Missourians because they can't hear from the president on those specific issues.
Yes or no, if offered a job by the next administration, say former President Trump wins, would you take it and leave your post early?
Yeah, that's too vague of a hypothetical to answer. I want to be able to serve the people of the state of Missouri in the best way possible and to be able to be around my family and raise my children. And so right now I'm myopically focused on being the Attorney General.
All right, leaving your options open. I got you. You've mentioned your love of the Constitution. We know the right to initiative is an important part of Missouri's Constitution, which you've sworn to protect. Earlier this year, the state Supreme Court forced you to stop holding up a petition effort from groups working to protect abortion rights in Missouri. You wanted the state auditor to raise the projected cost, something he pushed back on. The courts deemed outside the scope of your office. You are pro-life, and you've campaigned on this as a conservative candidate. If you continue on as Attorney General, will you protect the law and potentially pass constitutional amendments even if they involve a stance or a subject you disagree with or don't like?
Yeah, look, I have to defend laws that I disagree with all the time. I am vehemently pro-life. I think that we need to protect children. As a foster parent who's adopted children, I think we can find loving homes for all kids. And so the destruction of human life is abhorrent to who I am as a Christian and as a father. At the end of the day, I swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution and enforce the laws given to us by the people and the people's elected representatives in the General Assembly, and that's what I'm going to do.
We talk about national politics, and many of the Missouri races, campaign ads, feel like they are national races here. Let's try to put that aside for the moment. So national politics aside, please. What is the single biggest issue facing Missourians here at home, inside our borders?
Well, I think crime is an enormous issue that's impacting all Missouri communities in a negative way, and I'm proud of the work that I've done, not only to remove a prosecutor in St. Louis who was refusing to enforce the law, had a 96% non-prosecution rate. It had caused more than 500 businesses to leave downtown St. Louis, but going circuit by circuit to meet with elected prosecutors, sheriffs, and police chiefs, that's resulted in a 133% increase in trial court level criminal prosecution from my office statewide. So I'm really proud of the work that I'm doing to lead the efforts to fight back against violent crime, enforce the rule of law, hold wrongdoers accountable, and find justice for victims.
If elected to a full term, does that continue in city cities across the state. What does that plan look like?
Yeah, we're going to continue to find new and innovative ways to effectively deploy state resources to assist local efforts at fighting crime. We're going to continue to enhance our consumer protection division. Last year alone, we recovered more than $32 million in settlements and judgments on behalf of defrauded Missourians. And that's putting real money back in the pockets of working Missouri families. I'm dedicated to ensuring that there's a level playing field for Missouri consumers and proud of the work we've done. And I think we can expand those efforts going forward.
How do you plan to convince the people that you're charged with serving in Missouri from all walks of life, right, and political parties, that you have their best interests at heart when all they're seeing are conservative releases or talk about the Trump prosecutions and, suits against the Biden administration and the like? How do you bring people together as Attorney General?
Well, I think it's doing the good blocking and tackling, the work assigned to the Missouri Attorney General's office in statute by the people's elected representatives in the General Assembly, that good consumer protection work we've done. We've got a robust civil defense practice as well, where we've defended the state agencies and obtained 7 complete defense verdicts in a 15-month period. That 133% increase in criminal prosecution statewide, and our partnership with law enforcement agencies across the state, our new initiatives to combat human trafficking that has increased recently in the state of Missouri, leading to more than 1,100 incidences of reported human trafficking. I mean, these are important issues to everyday Missourians that the people around the kitchen table care about, and we're fighting and winning on those issues. And so taking care of the small stuff and the big stuff, and again, delivering wins on behalf of the people of the state is imperative to the work that I do.